Hey everyone, my name's Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind, and today I'm going to share with you popular YA authors I'm never going to read. Let's start off with the video. I'm sure you're very interested to know my answers to this. So I'm going to start off with Cassandra Clare. So I read, I think maybe like The City of Bones and maybe even a couple of them basically when they came out. So when I was like, I want to say a young adult. I'm not exactly sure like what age I was precisely. I mean, I'm sure that I could look it up and I could like figure out when I read it. But anyway, I read it basically right when they came out. And they were okay. I remember thinking like, oh, this is interesting. And it was also my first experience with urban fantasy YA. Before that, I'd only really read urban fantasy adult or urban fantasy like paranormal romance kind of things. So it was like my first urban fantasy YA, and I was kind of like, okay, I like this, but like it wasn't something where I was going to continue reading the series and, you know, continue reading it till now essentially. And so now, why would I not read the books? So basically, I'm kind of done with the Mortal Instruments series. I remember reading it and being very frustrated with some of the characters, and then also I've seen, you know, offshoots of the series and things like that, and like the TV series and stuff like that. And it just doesn't really interest me, and it was kind of sad because I really like the idea of urban fantasy YAs and I really want to see more of those. But yeah, it was not for me. And so also I feel like Cassandra Clare hasn't really written like other things besides that. And I'm not saying that I would probably, like, of course, when I say never, I'm starting with Cassandra Clare because, of course, when I say never, this is probably my most mild on the list of authors that I would never read, essentially. But, yeah, I just, like, I don't know. I just think that unless it was something, like, where someone I really trusted read it entirely different non-Mortal Instruments, like maybe even non-urban fantasy, whatever, then maybe, but, like, it's just not my thing. I also feel like there's been controversies with Cassandra Clare in the past, and I don't even remember them because they've been a while back, but I just don't really need to get involved in that. And yeah, I just, like, at this point, if I even wanted to pick up a new Cassandra Clare book, I feel like I'd have to read all of these other various things, and I'm also just, like, not in that realm. You're gonna see that all the authors of these are just white authors, and I'm at the point in my life where I'm really, really pushing to read more and more books by people of color and books by queer authors and stuff, and then looking really to like highlight the diversity. There's still series that I like to keep up with, but yeah, there's no reason why I would like start up essentially this that series, and so I just like don't see myself ever really reading it. And I just feel like there are certain authors where it's kind of like maybe, I don't know, but it's also kind of like I know that I want to stay away from that. And yeah, so Cassandra Clare is definitely on the list, and I think that was kind of like that was nostalgic, maybe past me, that also really wasn't reading critically either, but still also didn't like it enough to continue, and I'm just leaving that in the past basically because I gotta move on. It's too many books. There's like, I'm never gonna read as many books as I want to read in my life, which is, you know, an intense thought. But the question is, what am I going to do with my reading times? What am I going to do with the channel? You know what I mean? How am I going to spread my joy of reading around? And I'd rather do that on, frankly, on authors or on books that like would benefit from me talking about them. And I just feel like Cassandra Clare also doesn't need me. Doesn't need me. I'm fine with it. It's just, you know, but it's true. The next one has to be John Green. I remember the hype around The Fault in Our Stars, and it was like not a book for me, really. And I felt we were super wary also because it was dealing with like such intense subject matter, and also early reviews from people I trust had been looking unfavorably on it, and so I was kind of like, miss me with that. I don't need it. Like, I don't need to read another book. Like, I just don't need to read it essentially. And so I was thinking, okay, but would I read like another John Green book? And I guess for me the feelings are more akin to how I feel well, they're not really more akin to how I feel about Cassandra Clare, because I have read some of the Mortal Instruments books in the past. But for me, it's just like, it's just not for me, I guess. I think that there are readers for every book. I think that there are, well, I mean, debatably so, but you know, I think, what am I trying to say? I think that this is not a book for me, and I think that other people may find other books from John Green very helpful, and I've certainly gotten comments like that before, but it's just not for me. Like, if I think for John Green, I mean, not taking into account like questionable things I've heard about The Fault in Our Stars, like that specific book, and also instances of manic pixie dream girls, which like in general I just cannot stand. Like that trope, I'm not with it. I just no. It's one of those things where if I were to have, you know, a clean TBR, what book would I pick in my TBR? And is John Green ain't it? That's all I'm saying. And now we're getting on to books where it's not more about preference, it's not, you know, whatever, it's about like no, hard no's. So one of the first hard no's that I have the least, let's just go with like the least story time to the most story time for this category. The first one is Rainbow Rowell. I didn't read Eleanor Park. I didn't read it as a teen. I didn't read it as an adult. I'm not going to read it, period. I've just heard so much awful things about like the Asian appropriation and the way that Rainbow Rowell handled like all of that essentially. And the fact that that's one of like the most popular or still well-known books in that kind of area, you know, in the contemporary YA sphere, and we keep, you know, it keeps popping up, we keep seeing it being brought up, we keep seeing, I think there's like an adaptation gonna happen or whatever, like it keeps, basically, it's still in the consciousness of the YA sphere, essentially, and it's just like, it shouldn't be, period. And so I haven't read it, like disclaimer, I haven't read it, and it's like, I don't need to read it. There are people that I trust, and there are people who are impacted and hurt by it, and they have expressed their beliefs, and I'm with them. Like, there are so many books, and this is gonna come up later when we talk about a certain Mr. J. Kristoff. There are so many books that I have personally just loved to pieces with Asian authors, and I know how hard it is to be published, to like have, you know, it being thrown in your face like, oh, well, we already have one, you know, South Asian you know, book on our publishing thing for that season, we can't acquire another one, you know, like that. And then differences or barriers of privilege, and also differences in like marketing budgets is a huge thing. And then also, you know, just all of those things, and then also the imposter syndrome that one feels when they're thinking about their own writing and their own writing portrayal of their own identity. I really loved Sarah Kuhn's thread about this on Twitter with dealing with I Love You So Mochi, which was like a fantastic book, so good. And then just, yes, this feeling of imposter syndrome. And it's like, if I'm living in this world where there are books like that, and books that are so fabulous, that deserve so much more love and hype and attention and marketing money and just like love in general, and then I hear that book like, you know, gaining more hype, and it's just, it's sad, and it's like disappointing that this is kind of what it is. And it's like, am I surprised? No. Do I need to use that, like use my platform and use my voice to give creators like that or authors like that space, time, marketing, promo? No. The answer is no. This is my channel. This is my life. This is my life. This is my reading thing, and like I get to choose what books I feature in my Instagram posts, what books I feature here. I get to choose what books I lend my voice to, and it's a conscious choice. And well, I try to make it a conscious choice. And so that's my responsibility. It's my responsibility as someone who gives book recommendations that I give a good book recommendation, right? Like, even if a friend of mine, and I wasn't a book blogger, right, asked me like, hey, do you, have you heard of this book? I'm gonna give my honest opinion, and I'm going to give opinion that I want to serve the reader, that I want to serve a person. I don't want to serve a person. I want to give an opinion that will help someone and that will give someone a good feedback. And so it's like, yeah. Rainbow Rowell's on the list. Is just what it is. The next one, let's just go on. So the next one is Sarah J. Maas. This is intense because like there's so many different books that Sarah J. Maas has written. I haven't read any of the YA books like ever. I think I own maybe an e-copy of Throne of Glass. Not reading it. I might as well just take it off my Kindle. Like it's part of the fact that Sarah, like Cassandra Clare, Sarah J. Maas doesn't need me, and if I can be reading and supporting and celebrating authors that I feel like are underhyped or deserve more love, that's what I'm gonna do. And then B, it's like, I just don't need to read them. I've never looked at the premises of them being like, oh my god, I really want to read this book. I read Crescent City, and I just don't think that I would continue that series. I read it with my book club, and I'm just not going to. Like, I think that when I think of how disappointed I was also by Crescent City, or sorry, House of Earth and Blood, then I just am like, why would I continue reading it, right? If I'm going to read something that I want to read for like pure enjoyment and not critically or whatever, I could just read some of my favorite books again. I could just reread, something else, right? I could go back to Heron Complex. I could go and read like some of my, old favorite books. I could reread The Reader. I could reread the Bone Witch trilogy. I could do all of these different things, and it's like, I don't need to then be reading that one. I don't need to be reading a book like that, period. I'm feeling very salty today, but I'm also very frustrated at this current moment with the way that publishing puts money behind books to create bestsellers, but also how the idea of like New York Times bestseller lists, or how the idea of best-selling books is kind of created, and how you're driven by the hype, and just a huge amount of just internal behind the scenes workings about how books essentially get that title, and then how they're more likely to then keep that title as well. And there's a huge issues with all of these variety of things, but it's kind of like, I don't need to be doing it, right? And as I said, nothing about Sarah J. Maas appeals to me in the like the content of the books essentially, and even the world building. That was one of the things I was pretty disappointed with in Crescent House of Earth and Blood, and it just felt so lackluster and underdeveloped to me. So I just don't need to be reading that, and yeah, I don't think I'm going to be continuing that series. And yeah, I'm definitely not going to pick up any of the YA stuff. So it's just kind of how it is. And then finally, it brings me to the last one of this video, which is J. Kristoff. So I'm not gonna lie, the whole reason that I even started making this video was like, I was thinking about, oh, I'm gonna add J. Kristoff on my list of books, or on my list of authors I'm not going to read. And then I was like, wait, what other authors are on my not going to read list? And then I came up with those. And it's, as you've seen, because you've made it this far through the video, it's a mix of like authors where authors where I'm upset with, authors where it's just like, nah, not for me. It's a mix of different things. But then it brings up to J. Kristoff, right? There's been a lot of stuff on the internet recently, and by recently, I am filming this in April. I don't know when you will see it, but I'm filming this in April. And so for time traveling you, right now we're just kind of heading off, or we're just kind of leaving the 4 special edition arcs. We're just sort of leaving this resurgence of outrage over the Asian appropriation in Storm Dancer, which I haven't read, and it's bringing up all of my memories of, oh wait, wasn't there an issue with the identity in Aurora Rising, wasn't there this, it's just bringing up all of these different things that's kind of like, well, no. So this was a bigger story time, right? So let me talk about my history of books. I did not read Illuminae till really late, really recently. I want to say 2019, maybe 2020. And I really liked it. Like, I think the concept of Illuminae is very unique and that's kind of what drove me to read it, and it's also what drove me to like it, right? There aren't that many books in the YA sphere that have that kind of multimedia format in it, and yeah, it got me. It got me, and I really, really loved it. But then I read Aurora Rising. Actually, maybe I read Aurora Rising first. I'm not really sure. But I remember liking it, but I wasn't like 5-star obsessed with it. Then it led me to Aurora Rising, and I wasn't as obsessed as I wanted it to be, especially because it was all like found family, spaceship crew, you know, all of those different stuff around it. And so it was kind of like, well, meh. It was like a high stakes adventure, which I really did enjoy. But at the end of the day, once I read it as an arc, and then I heard there were also issues with like the characterization of a character, and basically another kind of like I think it was like an Asian character as well. Anyway, the controversies with it, then it was kind of like, well, great. And at that point, I had not heard about any of the Storm Dancer stuff, like none of that stuff. So then I went into Aurora Burning, which I did read, and I was even more disappointed. And not even necessarily, it was just like, I felt like it was such a middle book syndrome that I was just super disappointed with it. I'm struggling to explain why I was so disappointed with it, but I was. And now, then it's brought up all of the past allegations as well from Jay Kristoff, the lack of any apology that I'm aware of from them. And it's just like, that's kind of the final straw for me. I don't feel like, I think that even since I read Illuminae, even since I read Aurora Rising, Aurora Burning, I like to think that I'm growing as a person as I continue reading, as I continue to challenge my own ideas, my own thoughts, my own biases, you know, learn more, educate myself. And so the person I am today is so different from the person I was last year, the person I was in 2019, you know, X amount of years. And it's just like, I'm just so much more interested in books that I want to read. And it's like, Jay Kristoff doesn't need me. He doesn't need my voice. He doesn't need my platform. He doesn't need my money. Like, he just doesn't need me, essentially. And so I'm kind of like, I'm over it, right? I think I felt more and more upset within the last year about appropriation, about all of these different issues than I probably ever did before. And I just feel like this is enough for me. And so if this is the final straw for me, then that's just it. And so if you don't see them on my shelves, that's just the truth, right? I just feel like I'd been thinking about wanting to finish this series, and then all the stuff coming up over and over again, and it's like, well, no. The answer is just no, I guess. And so at the end of the day, it's like, what I don't like as well is when people do not issue any sort of statement, and they don't take accountability for their actions, and they don't apologize to people they've hurt, but also don't take accountability, right? So I think the whole concept of kind of good apologies are that not only do they list specifically what they've done and sort of are sad about it, they also take a very accountable step about what they're going to do to remedy their wrongdoing. And I just feel like, since I haven't heard anything, I don't need to be supporting it. And as I said, all of these authors in this video, they do not need me at all. They don't need my voice. They don't need any part of like me as a person. They don't necessarily care if like appropriation has their words, their appropriation has hurt me. They don't really, right? At the end of the day, people like bigger authors like that are only going to come out and apologize when it's becoming a social media stir, right? So even if I emailed and was like, oh, this thing hurt me, etc., you know, why? They're not gonna care, right? They're only gonna care if they feel forced, essentially, to like make a statement. And yeah, that's just it. I don't really know how to end this video. It's certainly different than a lot of my other videos, and I certainly feel saltier and angrier and more frustrated than ever before about it. But yeah, just recent things have made me really kind of calm down and be like, I want to make a firm stance on my social media. I want to make a firm stance as a book blogger about the things that I don't want, and the things I don't appreciate, the things I don't want, the things I don't agree with, and the things that you won't be seeing. And I'm really sorry if you like any of these authors that I've mentioned. I think that people's reading opinions are their own, but I think that it's important to know that like that is my stance on it. I want to be known. I love how I have something I want to say and then it immediately is essentially a Taylor Swift quote. But essentially, I want to be known for what I love and what I support. I want to be known for the things that you can find here. So the things that you can find here are reviews of books I love. The things that you can find are reviews of books that I don't recommend, right? The things that you can find are books of diverse books, of queer books, of Asian books, of looking for more adoption rep in my life and in, books. These are the things you can find here. And I don't, I have certainly hyped series that I want to read for vlogs like I did for the Grishaverse, but just so you know, these authors won't be on it. That's just how it's gonna be. So anyway, so please let me know below maybe what some of your authors are that you will never read. I would like to always know this, and we can chat about it below.